The United Nations was founded right here in the United States in 1945 at the end of World War II. It was set up at the Presidio in San Francisco by our military-industrial complex. The Rockefellers put up the money to build Rockefeller Center and to also give them the land for the United Nations. So this whole area is New World Order funded and controlled. And basically, it's a debating club to make the third world think that they have authority and to think that they're part of the power process. But really, the G8 or the G8 nations control the United Nations through the Security Council. We hear the reports all the time. They're in the news where some UN bureaucrat runs over somebody when they're drunk driving in New York or Washington, D.C., and nothing can happen to them. But it gets a lot worse than that. The United Nations has been caught hundreds of times running giant sex rings with kidnapped women and children out of Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East. It's a huge business. And right here in New York, they routinely catch these UN officials and even low-level bureaucrats with their own house slaves. Many times it'll be some UN delegate from Asia. He's got some kidnapped little girl from Russia. So these are the people in here telling you that world government's good and that they need to run your life. And you look at the UN's Charter and Declaration of Human Rights, it says you don't have any rights. It says the UN is the absolute arbiter and authority. And now we see our own government adopting the UN model of governance. The United Nations believes that private property should be in their hands, controlled by them. And when it comes to self-defense, back in 2000 at a UN meeting held here, their organization UNIDIR called for all civilian firearms to be confiscated. In fact, they stated that civilian ownership of firearms threatens the legitimate power monopoly of the state. Now, what's a power monopoly of the state? That's a dictatorship or martial law. And they strive to have governments have the monopoly of power over the people. Remember who was for gun control? Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Fidel Castro. In every case, if a government tries to disarm you, it's tyrannical. Black Americans couldn't own a gun. Native Americans had their firearms confiscated. Roman slaves 2,000 years ago couldn't own a sword or even a knife. Being disarmed is one of the key hallmarks of a society that's enslaved to its government. Sorry. A pile of fake signs meant to look like they were individually made. Getting slick here. Republicans do that too. See, this is a UN operation. This is a UN operation, so look how it's all meant to look like it's individuals. Imagine what would happen if these tens of thousands of people were truly informed about the nature of the geopolitical system. Imagine if they saw the big picture and understood that the UN is controlled by the same people that run George W. Bush. But they're all here beneath the United Nations, calling for it to be the global authority, and that somehow all of the ills in our government are caused by national sovereignty. When that's not the case, my friends. The people destroying America are the very people that created the United Nations. It is nothing more than a rubber stamp, a front group of the military-industrial complex, of the New World Order. Year after year, the peace activists come out in an ineffective move criticizing Republicans, but it's impossible for them to ever criticize Democrats, who are, as the cliche goes, two sides of the same coin. Democrats and liberals, progressives, socialists, communists, whatever you want to call them, can see the corruption of the Republican Party, which is there for anybody to see. It's horrible. But they can't see the corruption of the United Nations that had thousands and thousands of Indians murdered in Burma just a few years ago to make room for United Nations UNESCO land sanctuary. These guys can see the corruption of the big oil companies, but they don't want to see the document showing that the big oil companies put up the money to found the United Nations so they could control this growing world government body way back in the mid-1940s. You know, we've got the documents where Dr. Henry Kissinger back in 1973 told the most populated 5 third world nations that they had to sterilize forcibly half their women or they wouldn't get IMF and World Bank funding. And the United Nations certified that plan with the IMF and World Bank and helped carry that out. The UN's been caught being involved in sterilization programs in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. And the last 6 years, 2 separate cases in Asia and Africa, the UN has been caught in massive vaccine programs, tainting them with a very expensive synthetic hormone. They bind it to the tetanus pathogen, give it to women. It's a program only for women because it wouldn't hurt men, and it then permanently sterilizes the women. Now, how is that loving and good? Well, you see, the United Nations thinks that population control is a good thing, both physically with a police state, but also stopping people's reproductive rights, sterilizing them. The UN has put out dozens of public documents where they're calling for an 80% world population reduction. In fact, at the Beijing Women's Conference, the World Conference, back in 1997, the head of the UN Food Program said, "We will use food as a weapon against the people, and we do not apologize about it." And they also gave China awards for their horribly vicious one-child policy. And now you've got 35 million more men in China than you have women. It's causing a societal breakdown. Even the communist Chinese are backing off that policy, and the UN has been urging them not to. Most of these people here are well-meaning good folks, just like most of the idiots at the Republican National Convention are. They can't see evil. They can't name evil. They can't face up to what it is. The facts are a bunch of Malthusian, social Darwinist, same people that funded the Nazis, set up the UN to con good liberal-minded people into being part of this system. That's all this is something to co-opt the population and to enslave the population and to misdirect people into thinking that they have a real escape from the fascism of the Republican Party and other right-wing command and control dictatorships around the planet. Well, President George W. Bush has won the election, and the elites got their man back in place. President Bush, of course, has been great for the elite because he's neutralized so many millions of conservatives who believe that he actually follows conservative policies, whereas in truth he's for open borders, gun control, signing on to UNESCO and the United Nations, the growth in government in his first term, double the growth rate under Bill Clinton. But because he is a supposed conservative, he is a key Trojan horse for the elite to actually bring down our national sovereignty and set up a domestic police state unit, just like we saw in Nazi Germany or communist Russia. And make no mistake, that's exactly what Homeland Security and the new domestic CIA director are doing, is turning America into a martial law nightmare. Bush all along has been a polarizing figure, keeping people in the left or the right paradigm. So is Kerry. He's been very polarizing. That's how the elite wants you. Divide and conquer. Balkanization. That's what it's all about. So now they've put their Trojan horse, their fake conservative, their neocon, back in office under very questionable circumstances. But either way, they always control the outcome of the election because both the candidates are from the same social clique, the same organizations, and they're related.
It was the same clique, the Kerry and the Bush. Okay, what is the option? The people, what do they have to choose?
The presidential elections have turned into diversions. The real power is at the county, city, and state level. And that's where we can all, as little people, have an effect and get involved and really change policies. So that's where I suggest people get involved. You know, I authored a resolution over 2 years ago to repeal the Patriot Act, and thousands of other people picked up on it, and my personal resolution has been passed in dozens and dozens and dozens of cities. Parts of my resolution were incorporated into other resolutions and have been passed in over 400 cities and 4 states. That's just so far. I'm sure you've heard about the movement to repeal the Patriot Act at a city and county level.
Yes, I did.
Well, I just came up with the idea for that over 2 years ago, put it out on my website, Infowars.com. The people like you took action where the power is really at, and we effected change in a mighty way. Instead of being diverted by this smoke and mirrors theater, that's all this is theater with the Bush-Kerry ticket.
Okay, the question is how you can act the small people because they believe one way or another way.
We're trying to break that paradigm, that false left-right paradigm. During the protest, we met some great New Yorkers who invited us out for a tour of the city by water in their speedboat. So to add some balance, I thought I'd end the film on a happier note. All in all, we had a great time in New York, despite the police state.